Welcome to my podcast. Today's dream, tomorrow's reality. My name is Vicki Poole. I'm a master transformational coach specializing in habit change. And this podcast is sponsored by the Enlightened Peach. And it's all about embracing our mosaic life. And some of you may ask, what is a mosaic life? Well, it is recognizing that all the pieces of our life, the good, the bad, the indifferent, have all come together to make us who we are. Change any one thing and we are different. With that in mind, I invite you to embrace your perceived imperfections and celebrate who you are. This podcast is unedited and raw, just like life. And I am your host, and I have a special guest with me today, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. But if you have any ahas or questions or appreciations, please leave a comment or a voice message. And remember to do the thing: like, subscribe, and share. So now let's get started. So this handsome gentleman right here is CK Redlinger. And I have to admit, I have known him for years because my best friend is his sister-in-law. And just so happens he has an amazing story of his life. And he also has been writing books. And I really wanted to get him on here and just share a little bit about his story, his books, and I just love, especially when somebody's writing things. And so I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself. And so take it away.
Well, thank you. Honored to be here. Great to interact with you in a different environment. This is really great. Congratulations on the success. I've watched some of your programs and
Cool.
found them
Thank
riveting
you.
And very interesting folks that you have on. Well, you know a lot about me, but I guess, it kind of starts with my parents. They're both United States Marines. And so I kind of grew up in what I call the land of giants. I had a lot of uncles and, of course, my parents, grandfather, all charting back to World War II, who served either in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and so on. And so I grew up around this, and it was a great environment to grow up around. And so I wanted to be a Marine like my mom and dad. And so I got out of high school. I grew up in Georgia and in Atlanta, Clayton County there, and went into the Marine Corps and chased that dream, because that was a dream of mine. And after several years, I got out and I went back to Atlanta to chase the second dream, which was become a cop like my brother, the husband of the friend that you just mentioned.
Yes.
And so I became a police officer, and I stayed there for 10 years, and I worked patrol in Southeast Atlanta.
So did you and Jack work at the same precinct? I don't remember that.
No, so Jack
Okay.
worked for City of Atlanta. I worked for DeKalb County Police Department, which, if your audience is familiar with Atlanta, it's divided up into two counties, strangely enough, Fulton County and DeKalb County. So DeKalb is it's probably the second or third largest law enforcement agency in the state. So it's a big department, a lot going on. We were policing at the same time. So we would run into each other occasionally. But I worked as a patrol officer in Southeast Atlanta, Decatur, what we call South Precinct. And then after a few years, I got fortunate enough to qualify for detectives, took the test, and worked hard so that I could go straight into robbery homicide. And I was able to do that. So I was in robbery homicide for about 4 years as a detective, and then made sergeant, went back to the street like police officers always have to do. You got to go back when you get promoted, show that you can manage and lead line officers. And then made detective sergeant, went back, got into vice, eventually ended up in SWAT. And then I saw an opportunity after September 11th to go overseas, working in Iraq as part of a private contracting firm. And so in 2004, I headed over to Iraq and went into Baghdad. I spent a lot of time down in the south part of Iraq, down in Basra, Al-Amara, and working for this company. And then they sent me over to Jordan the country of Jordan as a country manager. And so I landed there, and I spent the next 11 years of my life living in Jordan. And while I was there, I changed jobs a few times, and I ended up going to work for King Abdullah. He had a new special operations training center that was being built by the United States. It's kind of a center of excellence. And I was really fortunate enough to go to work there with the first cadre of instructors. And then after that, I got hired by the State Department as a program manager for what they call anti-terrorism assistance. It's a foreign partner.
Still in Jordan?
Still in Jordan. By that
Okay.
time, I'd been there so long, you kind of become a go-to guy for things. They're like, oh, that Redlinger guy, he's been here for a while, maybe throw it at him. And so I went to work for the embassy and this program, and I did that for about 3 years. Some spaces in between there, I got into the movie industry because they were filming a lot of war films in Jordan. And
Oh, I didn't know that. Ooh, tell us more about that.
Yeah, Zero Dark 30, if you remember that
Yeah.
movie, was being filmed in Jordan, and they actually came to the training center wanting to train the actors. So I was the liaison, and I helped situate that. And then I got introduced to the film commission, the Jordan Film Commission, in the process, and it was another one of those go-to things. So they kept coming back to me, and then, hey, can you train actors to be like soldiers, or can you help us choreograph battle scenes for a movie? And then it turned into some stunt performances, and then
Oh, wow.
can you play this part? Can you? It was really
Talk
strange.
about right place, right time, right?
Oh yeah, very bizarre kind of pathway.
Yeah.
But, so I stayed in touch with all of that. Eventually, I came back to the United States and was out in California for a while.
Now,
And
didn't you get married while you were out there, or no? You
I
waited till you
did.
got back.
I did.
Okay.
I met my wife in Jordan, and we have some beautiful children, and now we're settled here in Texas, working in the corporate world and writing some books on the side. And so that's the long way around the block. And I probably left some things out for time's sake.
That's
But
all right. We might go back around to them at some point if we feel we need to. But the thing that I am really super excited, and I've had some interviews with some authors, and I actually have a friend who's an author, but she's a romance author, so it's a totally different animal. But so it fascinates me because I have always wanted to write a book, and I have probably 4 or 5 notebooks with started books, and then it's like something that I start it, I get into it, get distracted, and then I forget about it, and then I start another one. And so it has to take a certain amount of discipline once you get into this is what I'm going to do to create that. Is that your experience?
yeah, it is. It's an easy thing to procrastinate with.
Yeah, it is for
Now,
me.
and I'll tell you, I didn't want to write books all my life, but I did want to start writing. This started about 8 years ago, and maybe it was because I reached a point in my life where I thought I've really chalked up some cool experiences and thought, I could really weave some interesting characters together and some storylines. And plus I was doing the movie stuff, and the whole point of being a technical advisor on a movie is to help ensure there's authenticity of the subject matter. If it's military or a battle, or are the metals being worn properly, does the person have a straight trigger finger when they should? And these things that people like me, and I'm sure people in your audience, kind of pick out on TV shows and
that's
movies.
not real. I've done that before with other stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, it ruins the movie for me when the first 5 minutes I see this hero doing something. I'm like, what? And then it's finished. So writing books became an interest to me, and for
so were you
years,
well, before you get to that,
yeah,
when you were in school and everything, were you a writer then? Did you have any because there are some people who say they had this ability to write, and then some people it was just suddenly they started writing. So
I think there were some clues I'll say
Mm-hmm.
that. I
Okay.
don't think that my teachers would stand before you and say, "Oh yeah, we saw this all along." Uh,
We knew he was going to be a genius.
Hardly. I think, however, there, I, I, there was some. I don't know. I've always been a creative person in a sense. I like creating things. Sometimes, whether it's, when I was younger, it was T-shirts or logos or whatever, and then it eventually evolved into stories, I guess. But I think the writing part got a little fine-tuned with, strangely enough, in the Marine Corps, because you do have to write some reports every now and then. You have to write in log books and all of this, and they make you write in a very structured way. And then when I became a police officer, there was a ton of writing because you're always writing police reports. And then when I became a detective, especially working in homicide, a lot of case notes and a lot of court supplementals, and to the point to where everything has to be really detail oriented because you're dealing in many cases with life and death. And then the going to court and having to testify. And so I think all of that kind of helped sculpt it to a certain degree. And then one day it just kind of clicked. But going back to the procrastination part, um, I'm usually not a procrastinator, but with this, I was like, okay, I got to become a better typer first because I'm a search and destroy type of typer.
Yeah.
And so that was like, okay, yeah, that'll need to go out and do that and learn how to do that better. I was always taking notes. That's a good thing. Oh, let me watch another master class or something. And so there was a lot of this going
Been
on.
there, done that with
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of stuff, right?
And then 1 year ago, a little more than a year ago, I finally put my foot down. I don't know what finally happened, but and now I'm on a third book in 1 year.
Nice.
So it's proven to me that, okay, it's great to prepare, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also, just like overanalyze things, you can over prepare. And so it's important to just kind of double check yourself. But if that story doesn't encourage you to write, I don't know what is, because I was not a great student. Uh, I certainly wasn't like a literature major or anything like that. But I think it's just about having some stories, some experiences that you can take, weave into something interesting, and then there you go. You're off to the races.
Okay. Well, that gives me a lot of ideas for myself too, because um, it's like I have a plethora of experiences in my life that some of them are not things you really want to talk about, but I've got plenty of them. So maybe um, it would be cool to create a fictional book like what you've done, and then weave some of these stories in there to help tell another story that maybe
Yeah,
these pieces are in. So is that kind of how you did yours? I know when I talked to you earlier, you said that certain things about the book are actually places in your life or things that have happened in your life. So is that
yeah.
kind of how you
Well,
did that?
it. I think it would. I've always heard the saying, write what you know, write what you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with, because that'll probably be very natural to you, of course, and it will flow. Of course, you're not always going to have things that you know about. You got to do some research, and it's really, that's another thing. It's really easy to over research. It's very easy to get lost in that part of the process, saying, "Oh, well, I need to do some more research." Yeah, enough research. Just start
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah. I was in a
Just
class right before we got on here. And one of the things that she said in this class was she said, stop procrastinating, be messy, just do it, And so I think that's a motto that a lot of people that are on the creative spectrum have to really develop in themselves, because I'm like that. I will study and take another class and another master class, and I will end up getting so bombarded with all of these classes and everything that I don't have time to do the things I really want to do.
right. And that's what it sounds like. That's exactly what you're experiencing. And I'm glad you said that about being messy, because that's exactly what I do now. That's like the first phase.
Okay.
is just write. Don't even worry about writing in sequence. Just write and write and write and get your ideas on paper. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about grammar,
Do
sentence
you
structure.
write or type it?
Well,
Or
I
both?
mean, when I say write, I mean type. Now, if you want to go write, that's great, but I'm typing.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
typing. Old school terminology, I guess. So just get it down,
It's probably
right?
the
And
same thing. It's just all of a sudden I could visualize you with a pen
yeah,
and a paper, and I
yeah.
thought, wait a minute, maybe that's not accurate.
And that's another thing is before I write, I spend a lot of time, and we can talk about more of this later because it's been such a great tool in my life, mental rehearsals. And I mentally rehearse the ideas in my head. So I literally create a movie in my head and I play it out and I tweak it in my head and then I go and write it real quick and then just keep writing and get it down. Then once you have something all down written on your computer, then you go back and you start to analyze it and say, you know what, that's a good chapter. Let's put that in front of this chapter. Let's move these around, almost like puzzle pieces. And now you're putting it into a sequence that you want, because maybe you have two plots going on and you got to hop back and forth, and you don't want to like just have all of one plot and then the next. You want to kind of
Yeah.
weave them together.
Yeah.
And then after you do that, then you can go in and be your editor. You can be the editor and do all of that, the spelling and the grammar and the sentence structure and so on. And then next thing you know, you got something.
Yeah.
And you sculpt it a little bit more, and then you go off if you want to. Maybe that was the only thing you wanted to do. You just wanted to go through the process and write something and feel that accomplishment. Or maybe you want to go out and try to publish it for others to read. And then you got to put your business cap on, and that's a whole different kind of avenue.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just like with my coaching business, it's like there's so many different little caps that you wear through the process that it can be very mind-boggling sometimes, all the things you have to keep track of and develop and do. So
Yes, yeah.
back to the writing, you were talking about doing the visualization,
Mhm.
and that's something that I tell my clients to do, but it's more of looking at their life and creating a picture of their life where they want it to be, and playing it all out. And I never really thought about it as far as writing a book, as being able to play the your stuff in your mind and then write that out. It never occurred to me that it would work the same kind of way, but I can see that does.
Oh, mentally rehearsing is probably the most advantageous tool that I have ever discovered. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a really crazy story of how I discovered it. And it probably would sound very unorthodox. But before I tell you
Hey,
that,
tell us.
before I tell you that story, I will say that, the mental rehearsing aspect, and I'll use another famous author who does it in a different way. Um, Dan Brown,
Okay.
um, he actually would take a book, any book, a book on your bookshelf back there.
Mm-hmm.
He would print out his cover, and he would wrap it on the book, and he'd set it up on the bookshelf where he could see it every day. And so his subconscious at that point is seeing that book up there every day, and it is the programming in the subconscious is essentially getting to the point through repetition of seeing it every day that it starts to believe that already happened. Now that
Mm-hmm.
sounds crazy to you and me in our conscious brains, but
Right.
subconsciously over time, it starts to believe that that's already happened. And when it believes it's already happened, then it starts to do its work behind the curtain, since it's about 90% of your brain capacity anyway, and that small part up there, the conscious brain. And so it starts, shifting gears and doing things, and that you really don't even know, kind of putting shaping the terrain, I guess is a good way
Mm-hmm.
to put it. And so that's one method that he uses. I think he even wrote like a New York Times bestseller like article and would put his name in it And so he'd read it, and it's not an ego thing. It's just he knows the process of programming the subconscious. And so I would use that same technique. I learned it in the Marine Corps. I was in a unit that was a tactical unit and was responsible for what they call close quarters battle. So it's very close in shooting inside of like a house or building. And with that, the shots have to be very surgical on target. You can't have any misses, flyers, things like that. And so it's a very high pressure, stressful environment, especially with flashbangs going off and all of this. And so when I went through the school as a young Marine, they taught us about mental rehearsals. And so you imagine, these Marines, these young Marines, almost really kind of a meditation type of thing where, you're sitting there in the quiet and you're thinking through every aspect of that task. Okay, the door gets breached. I smell the particular type of explosives. I smell it in my nostrils. I smell the gunpowder. I imagine myself, stepping through a splintered door. Maybe I even get cut on the door. I imagine when I'm first going to see the fog, the smoke, the fog of war. And so what that helps or what helps your subconscious do is it's in a way it's stress inoculating you if you do it frequently. And while you can work in some adversity, the end goal of what you're trying to do is you envision kind of like a movie of you succeeding, whatever the end result is. You clear that room, you rescue a hostage, whatever. The end result is you're stimulating as vividly as you can all of your senses through your mind to achieve what you want. So then you just apply that same formula to anything else. And I'll say this, after I learned that, I thought back when I was a kid, and I wanted to be three things when I was a kid. I wanted to be a Marine, I wanted to be a cop, and I also wanted to be in the movies, but I wanted to be a ninja too, but that's another thing. But I daydreamed about that stuff all the time. And I'm convinced now that all that daydreaming, even about the movie part, right?
Yeah.
That my subconscious was always playing that in the programming and said, okay, we'll shape the terrain. You move forward and we'll shape the terrain and make these things happen. And it's like the movie thing. I didn't plan to be in the movie industry. It just happened. But I think subconsciously I was kind of being, okay, a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. Okay, just keep going straight. And so I think that's the way it works with a lot of us.
Yeah.
But they don't teach that in school. So
I know. And it's funny because, there's a lot of people who say, well, I can't manifest anything. But if they were to sit down and really think about how many times they rehearsed the bad thing in their mind that they were afraid was going to happen, they were manifesting all the bad stuff because they were just not doing it on purpose. And so it's really cool when you can get to a place where you can create these things in your mind and actually see them come to fruition. Like I said, I use this with my clients. And so I'll even help them, we'll do a mental rehearsal where we'll look at their life, a year from now or 5 years from now. And we get into great detail to figure out exactly who they would be at that moment and what their life would look like and how it would feel. And then I help them to kind of step into that so that they can feel like that is definitely what's going to happen. And when you were talking about the author putting the book up on the shelf, I actually had a friend of mine that's an author, and one of the things that she did was she did a similar thing. She took and created her book cover on another book, and she went into like Barnes and Noble and she put it up on the shelf. And then she kind of walked away and came back and, recognized that it was there, took it off the shelf, and she did all these things. And she said she even thought about getting a table and setting it up and like she was going to sign books and see if anybody chased her out. I don't really know if she did that or not, but she was going to do that.
it's wonderful that she recognizes that her brain works like that
Yeah.
and is
Yeah.
actually doing something. And like I said before, it's very unorthodox sounding, whether it's, uh, tactical type stuff in the Marine Corps or it's writing books. It's it's really a powerful tool, but for me, in my opinion, it only works if it is done religiously or frequently. Or
Mm-hmm.
for me, everything is about um, gradual gains and repetition.
Right.
And I tell people all the time, you know, procrastinating, just do a little bit, and make sure you do a little bit tomorrow and a little bit the next day, and you keep that coming up or keep that going because it's going to compound. It's like investing,
Mm-hmm.
and um, it's just the practice. It's just the practice of doing it repetitively and doing something all the time.
Right.
And it's just like with writing. If you do that, you write a paragraph every day. Next thing you know it, you're writing a chapter every day. And then next thing you know it, after a few months, you've written a whole book.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a formula for life, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Because it's interesting because as we're talking about the books and everything, and it's given me kind of lighting a little bit of fire underneath me to and actually maybe start a new book with something maybe like what you were talking about, is just writing some of the stories that I have and then going and figuring out how they connect together or what kind of story they would tell. And because I think what was holding me back a lot of times was I really felt like I needed to know how it started and know how it ended and just fill it all in. And from what you're saying, and then this other friend that's the author, one of the things she kept telling me was, just let it write itself. If you'll get in front of it and start writing, it just kind of almost your characters come to life in your mind, and you can create. So of course at the time she was saying that, I was thinking that's because you're a writer.
Mm, I would agree, and I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to that subconscious mind again, because
Mm-hmm.
if you are, we don't know what is going on in our subconscious, but
Right.
if we're putting good stuff into it, it's gonna take it and make the magic happen. If, like you
Right.
said earlier, if you're thinking bad stuff or you're reflecting on past incidents all the time, then all you're doing is burning all that into your brain, and so your subconscious is like, I guess this is what you want to think about all the time, so I'll make sure it happens because it'll be programmed now.
Yeah.
And so with writing or anything else positive that you want to do in your life, I think it is a matter of just keep doing a little bit of it, keep putting it in there, and eventually your subconscious will take hold and the things will start flowing out on the paper, the proverbial paper, the computer screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I know what you mean.
and you hear people say things like, well, it writes itself or whatever. Well, actually, it's your brain that's writing. It's just not the conscious part of your
Right.
brain.
Right.
Conscious part
Well,
is helping,
yeah.
but
I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm also a hypnotherapist.
I do know.
Um,
Very impressive.
Yeah, thank you. And so one of the things that when I'm talking to my clients and all is that, like I just had a discussion just the other day, and because a client was telling me how she kept saying that she was going to get in her 10,000 steps, but then she wouldn't do it. And she was saying she was going to do all these things. And so I told her, I said, what you're doing is you're training your brain that no matter what you say, you're not going to do it. So I said, create smaller goals that you can stick to. And I said, if you say you're going to go for a walk and you get up and you feel tired, put your damn shoes on and walk out the door. It doesn't matter how far you go. It's then you come back. And if you'll do that often enough, that 1% change every day, then, it'll get to where when you say, I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to walk, that your subconscious mind will start when the alarm goes off, your subconscious mind will start saying, you said you were going to get up. You said you were going to get up. Let's get up. Let's get up. Get up. And so it will actually start pushing you and helping you to make those choices to fulfill what you said you were going to do if you have been keeping your word to yourself, but otherwise it'll go the opposite direction and say, oh no, you stay in the bed, it's nice and comfy here, because she never goes anyway. So it's like you can exercise that muscle. And one of my favorite books, which it's a self-help book, not a novel, but it's by Jeff Olson. It's called The Slight Edge. And I don't know if you've ever read it, but it is all about the compound effect, and the 1% change every day makes exponential changes in your life, even though you can't see it today, you can't see it next week or the next, but over time it becomes this big epiphany in your life.
Yeah, it it's kind of like limiting belief, so if you have, that's the big problem I think a lot of people struggle with is they get in their own way, and they latch on to this kind of limiting belief, and that becomes kind of the program. And then when they try to do something different, or make a change, the subconscious brain's like, no, I got the program. You're the one that wrote the program. I'm just following it. So that's why it's so hard for people to make changes after New Year's and all of that. So I find it advantageous to create limiting belief challenges, ones that you, just like you're talking about, but create something that you don't want to do, but it's easy for you to break it. Like,
Right.
I don't want to take a colder shower today. Who wants to take a colder shower today? But that's an easy. There's control there. There's control mechanisms. So you do it. You breach the the limiting belief, and even though that may sound silly, that is still that gradual piece that goes into the subconscious, and it gets seeded, and now you do something else. Maybe when you wake up, you want to try to work out more, but you just can't make it happen. Well, wake up, and before you even walk out of your bedroom, plop down the floor, do 5 push-ups. If you can't do 5, do 2. And you just keep doing it until your brain starts to latch onto these things. And one of the things that really helped me, I wasn't an audacious kid. I'm probably just like any other kid. You self-confidence issues and so on. But I know I wanted to do some audacious things, and so in order to, I knew, I was like, I got to make some changes. I got to get more bold. And so I realized one way to do that and I'll give you an example, like at an obstacle course, for example. If you got a platoon of 40 Marines, whether you're in boot camp or whatever, and you're about to, run an obstacle course, I would always throw up my hand to when they say, okay, who's going first? And it's not that I was going to be the best by any stretch of the imagination, but I was doing it to kind of step into the gap and make myself be bold, because that is a scary thing to go first. Whether you're the first one on an obstacle course, the first one to give a briefing, the first one to do anything in front of a group of people is very scary. But if you force yourself to throw up your hand, knowing that you're probably going to fail, or maybe you'll embarrass yourself or whatever, but after the first few times, it takes hold and you start to continue to do it. And then there's a lot of really crazy things that happen as a result. One, you get better, you get more bold, you have an audacious spirit, you're more decisive, you make better decisions in other aspects of your life. And those people that are watching you, even though there might have been somebody faster on the obstacle course run, the leaders in that group start to think to themselves, even in their subconscious, like, those are the kind of character traits of a leader. And they remember that. And then people want to maybe lift you up, into a certain role or something. So I think that's a good tangible way to implement, the theory that you were just talking about. At least it worked for me. And even at my age now, I still try to do it, even when I feel I try to put myself into those uncomfortable situations just to make sure that part stays sharp. But it definitely bleeds into other aspects of your life too.
Yeah, I'm definitely, that's a a thing that I do all the time. I'm always learning something new so that I can put my hand up and be the first. And it's gotten to the point with me that sometimes I will sit back and wait a minute because I feel like every time I get on these calls, it's like me, me, me. And then, I feel like maybe I'm not giving somebody else an opportunity. So now I've got where I'll wait a minute. Well, it doesn't even last a minute, but I'll wait. And then if nobody says anything, I'll say me, because it's like, okay, I gave you the opportunity. You didn't jump on it. So I'll go. And sometimes for me, going first feels better because, and this is probably going to sound very negative, but if somebody else goes first, then I might actually, especially when it comes to speaking and stuff, I might be comparing myself or what I'm wanting to say to what they did. And so, or I might be influenced by something they said. And so I want to be just me, and I want to jump up and say my thing and step away, and I'm good. And whether it's everybody loves it or everybody hates it, it doesn't matter. It's that I want to be able to say it without anything somebody else says infiltrating into what my message is.
Yeah.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense,
No,
but
it
yeah.
does. It does. There's definitely multiple things that, some people might think, oh, well, I want to watch the first 5 people do it so that, you know, I can get in the groove or whatever the case may be. But I think there is much more advantage to playing this game, if you want to call it a game,
Mm-hmm.
or this challenge, this self-challenge, much more advantageous to do it the way that you just mentioned, because for those reasons, I think, but also, your brain is like, oh, we're practicing. What are we doing here? Oh, okay, so you're going, okay, well, that means that you're bold. That means that you've got an audacious spirit, and so that's the way we're going to program you. And only great things come out of that.
Yeah.
So
And I will share, I haven't really said this to anybody really, but because I'm working right now on getting my material together to become a speaker. And because I want to get on the big stages. And I will tell you that even just saying it and knowing that I want to do it, it just makes my heart pound a little bit. So
yeah,
I know it's the right thing because it's scary as hell. So
it is.
I know I'm
Yeah.
going to do it. I'm just, I'm working on getting um a little bit of my ideas together, my materials together, and then just jumping out and being a speaker.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we our game, our minds are always playing tricks on us. Mostly our conscious brain, I think. But you've already kind of you've established this track record in your life, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
doing things a certain way and taking initiative. And you've got a podcast, and it requires you to speak intelligently on a lot of different things. You've got your practice. So even though you've got this huge track record of success and experience that in itself tells a story of, oh yeah, this would be no problem for you, this is a natural fit, we still kind of want to get in the way of ourselves, right? And I don't care who you are. You could be the biggest celebrity. And I've been around a few just from the time in the movie business. And watching those men and women practicing in their trailers or before they're getting ready to step up in front of the camera, I'm sorry, they're all struggling with the same things that we do,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
fear of screwing things up, the fear of being embarrassed, the fear of missing your line or missing the mark or whatever the case. And so I think we just have to realize that we probably can't write that completely out of our little journey. It's always going to
Right.
be there, but we just have to look at, in your case, look at the track record that you've established, because really that's the only thing that says it all. So
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I will say the one thing that helps me a lot of times when I feel that nervous feeling about stepping up or doing something that I'm not familiar with, is that I know that the feeling of excitement and the feeling of nervousness are the same. It feels the same in the body. You get that tightness, and you can even sweat and all those different things. It's the same. And so I will, when I remember, but I'm not perfect, so I don't always remember. But when I remember, I say, oh, right, that's the excitement that I'm feeling. And so I'm excited to do this, and it's going to be great. The excitement's here. As long as I'm excited, then it's going to go well. And, but like I said, I don't always remember that. I'll feel myself floating down into that angst of, I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. And this, wait. It's supposed to be excitement. Let me reframe that. So,
That's yeah, exactly. I do the same thing. I get nervous about things, but I've created formulas in my own mind that where I've told myself, affirming it or whatever the case is that that's what I'm looking for. I can't wait to feel that way, because that's what I'm after. That's what I want. That's the validation that you're doing something exciting, adventurous.
yeah.
And that's the byproduct. And after you convince yourself of that, it's not looked at it in so much as a scary thing anymore. It's the, oh, that I'm getting the thing I'm looking for. I'm getting the thing I'm chasing, and I'm attracted to. And so, like you said, it's just reframing it and convincing your brain that this is what you're after.
That's right.
The
That's right.
speech is secondary. I'm after that butterfly feeling in my stomach or in my chest.
Yeah. And I know in the beginning, because it's one of those, another growth process that you go through. So I've already, decided that I'm giving myself much grace and surrendering to the fact that I may not be so good the first few times I get up and do it. I might surprise myself, but I think when I say that, it's more that I know that in comparison, I will look 5 years down the road and say, oh my gosh, look how much I've grown, and look at it that way instead of feeling like I didn't do so well on the first one. It's just the growth process will be, bigger, right?
Yeah, and who does great on the first of everything that they've ever done in their entire life? I don't
I know.
care. You could be the greatest of all time in any area. I'm sure if you were to ask any of them, they'll probably all say the same thing and say, well, where did you see the most growth? Where did you learn the most? Well, it was when I screwed that up, or I
Yeah.
failed on that. And so we kind of need those things as a reference point. Life would be so uninteresting if you were just great all the time, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it? It would be. And I feel like all those little things that happened are growth pieces that goes into making our mosaic life, all the broken pieces and everything that comes together. Without those pieces, we might not be well, might's not even the right word. We would not be strong enough and able to handle whatever we're dealing with right now, whether it's good or whatever. We've had to have all of those things happen to us to put us in this place and make us appreciate and be strong enough to put it on our backs and carry it.
Yeah, there's no movie that is worth watching or no book that is worth reading, in my opinion, where there's not some struggle,
Yeah.
or there is not. I mean, have you ever seen a movie where it starts out, everything is great, and then it just goes great all the time, and then that's the end, it's so
No.
great.
If there was one, it
There's
probably never got really aired.
yeah, you've got to have
Yeah.
you got to have the struggle, you got to have some calamity, you got to have some disasters, and that's what makes good books and good movies, and that's the way our lives are. It's the human story. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um, you can either have a sad tale to where those things happen and you finish out your time here in the world at a low because you subscribed to it that way, or you can embrace those disasters and calamities and make them yours, and make that the starting point for the next spike, before you hit another one and go down, and then that's the starting point for the next spike.
Yeah.
And so that's
Definitely. Well, what I would love to do is just hear a little bit about your book. If you could kind of give us like the cliff notes or something. I know you said it's called Georgia Fall. That's your newest one, right?
Is, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us just a little bit, the teaser, I guess, for the book.
Sure. So, I actually wrote my first book strictly about, crime thriller. And then I was introduced into a group of authors. And this group is the publisher. It's called Raventhorn Books. And so there's this group of really talented authors, but they write disaster fiction, and they write kind of on the same timeline or in the same world.
Mhm.
And so I was invited to write a piece in that world, and it kind of all deals with like an EMP attack on the United States. It's kind of like the starting point, and then some people will write from the perspective of people in a certain state or in a different part of the country. And so I wrote mine from Georgia because that's where I grew up and that's what I knew well. My neighborhoods, the area in South Atlanta. And so I wrote on the same timeline, but just wrote from the perspective of these folks. And the idea is that these were regular folks and going about their lives much like you or I would do on any day until we're suddenly faced with the reality that an electromagnetic pulse has occurred and knocked out all of the anything that works on electricity and basically thrown us back to the dark ages, in a split second. And that affects everything. It affects food, it affects water, it affects shelter, how we stay warm, how we cool down,
How we
how
communicate.
we communicate, our safety. So difficult for law enforcement to police an area when their cars don't run anymore, when they may be challenged because they're like, hey, I got to go take care of my family.
Mhm.
And so these books really call all that into question and make it very interesting and realistic. And so I threw in a little zinger because I wanted to throw some crime in it as well. And I thought that would make it a little more interesting. So there's kind of two things that are happening. It's what's happening in the neighborhood, people stepping up into leadership roles, people coming together, challenges, crime taking hold. And then there's also a element of, trying to go get a relative on the other side of the continent who's in school, who you can't communicate with anymore. And, you can imagine being in that predicament, like, well, I don't even have a car to get there anymore. I can't get on a plane, can't get to the airport, whatever. And so that's kind of the adventure, is
Okay.
those two components. And so I was really appreciative that these esteemed authors allowed me to participate and hopefully not screw up their world. And but it's been fun, and it challenged me because now I was writing in a different genre that I wasn't comfortable with before. And that's something I wanted to tell you earlier is you might have an idea of all your experiences using them for said type of genre, but how could you use it in different types of genres as well?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Thank you for
so yeah,
that.
so I wrote the book. It's out. It's been out for the last week. It's done remarkably well. Exceeded my expectations. It's still on the top 10 bestseller list for 3 different
Nice.
categories, which I'm like, what? How did that happen? So I've been getting wonderful remarks from readers, and that's validating to like, okay, maybe this is something I continue to do. And so it's been a great experience.
Very
Absolutely
cool.
fabulous.
Well, before we get off here, because we're getting close to time, would you, since some people are going to be listening to this, and I am going to put all your links and all your information in the description, but just for people that might be listening, go ahead and, if you don't mind, share, like, if it's possible to share a link to the book, or if you have a link tree or anything that people can connect with you to
Okay.
find out more information?
Yeah. Well, you can always go to my website, which is www.ckredlinger. So it's CKREDLINGER.com. And I write short stories on there. The book information is there as well. Or you could just go to Amazon and type in Georgia Fall. It'll bring up the book area, and it should be the only one with that title that I'm aware of. And that's another way to access it.
Okay.
The print book will be out in the next week or two. Right now, you can either read it on the cloud, or if you have a Kindle device.
Okay.
Uh,
All right, cool. Well, I'm so excited for you being here and sharing with me, because like you said earlier, I've known you for a long time, just because you're Michelle's brother-in-law. And so it's really cool to have this discussion with you, because we've never really sat down and had a long discussion. So it feels really good to know this side of you.
well, thank you. It's been a pleasure being here. I'm so thankful you invited me, and supporting what I've done. And I'm equally proud of you for what you've done.
Well,
It's
thank you.
it's been a long time since we've chatted at this level, so thanks a lot.
Yeah, well, thank you. And so for the listeners, I want to thank you so much for being here, and I want to leave you with this phrase. The best way to predict the future is create it. So what are you creating? And I will see you soon.